Good morning, Year 11, and welcome today to your screencast for Conflict and Tension, Lesson 2, the Peacemakers. So, the Peacemakers then are also known as the Big Three, and they were the Allies, the Triple Entente during the First World War. So the Triple Entente included Georges Clemenceau, which we can see here. We then have David Lloyd George, the British Prime Minister, and we have Woodrow Wilson. So Clemenceau, leader of France in the middle, Woodrow Wilson on the right-hand side, leader of America, and David Lloyd George on the left-hand side, the leader of Britain. So you might get a question on the Peacemakers. It's Peacemakers or the Big Three, they're the same people. So, what were the aims of France after the First World War? Well, the aims of France was utter revenge on Germany. And the main reason for that was because most of the war was fought in France, and it absolutely devastated France. So they were really, really not happy. And if we think about then the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, blame. So this made this made France really, really happy because they were able to blame the entire war on Germany and take no responsibility for themselves. So if you want to know more about the actual terms of the treaty, I would really suggest going and looking at L3's video, which is the next video after this, because we're just going to go through how it impacts the peacemakers, so specific ones and how they impact the peacemakers in this. Armaments then. Armaments they were unhappy with, and they were unhappy with this if we think about it because France wanted Germany's really utter weakness, and the fact that Germany was still allowed an army, even though it was 100,000 men, in France's eyes still did threaten them. Again, France were unhappy with the reparations of £6.6 billion because they felt it just wasn't enough to rebuild France, to rebuild the destruction caused by Germany. And the territory then that Germany had taken off them, that was a kind of a mixed bunch for France. They were slightly pleased by this, and they were slightly pleased by territory because you had the Rhineland demilitarized, and the Rhineland demilitarized meant that France could invade Germany really, really easily if necessary. And they also had the Saar taken off them and given to France for 15 years. So the Saar was a really important coal minefield, and that really pleased the French because it helped, with their economic growth because coal was the main source of power. But ultimately, though, there were still some kind of concerns with the territory that Germany had. If it had been up to France, the German state wouldn't have existed. It would have kind of been dissolved, and it wouldn't, just because of the damage, it would have been a complete and utter annihilation of the German state. So, whilst there were some things France was happy about, there was also some things that they didn't quite agree with. And we can see that in some of the contemporary, so from the cartoons from the time. Here we can see the fact that Georges Clemenceau is shown as a tiger, quite a fierce animal, and we can see Germany down here as an eagle with its little crown on it. And I think the most telling thing to look out for here is the fact that Germany has its paw on France and it's crushing it to kind of show that this is our aim, this is the aim of the French peacemaker Clemenceau. And we can also see Clemenceau here, and we can see the anger on his face, and it says demands of an infinite amount of money, and it's called the reckoning. Again, kind of symbolising that this is what Clemenceau wants. He wants an unlimited amount of money from Germany. He wants to bring a reckoning to Germany. He wants to hurt it, something that they will never ever forget. So what do Britain want then? Well, Britain want a fair peace. And we can see that through the equal sign kind of on the board. So on one hand, Britain obviously fought against Germany in the First World War, and there was a recognition that they needed to be punished, especially from the idea of the British public. However, David Lloyd George knew that he would need to tread carefully because he still wanted Germany as a trading partner, and he didn't want to start another war, make the Treaty of Versailles so bad that Germans would rebel. So as a result of this, he had more of a balanced approach to the Treaty of Versailles and took that to the other peacemakers. So if we look at this then, blame, Britain was kind of inconsequential on blame. They were a little bit unhappy with blame just for the fact that they kind of thought it might spur Germany on in the future to start another war, but also they recognised the fact that they weren't going to blame themselves for the First World War. So actually, I put a sad face there, but it was probably actually they were okay with blame. In terms of armaments then, Britain were fairly pleased with armaments, and that's because they wanted the strongest navy, and Germany were kept to 6 battleships and that was it, and German navy would be nowhere near the threat of Britain's navy, so they were quite happy with that armament term. Reparations, Britain were more worried with, and they were more worried because, like I've already said, Britain wanted to trade with Germany still. Trade was really important to Britain and the British Empire at the time. So they worried that 6.6 billion would send Germany into an economic collapse and there would be no trade for Britain. So really, really important there. And in terms of territory then, there wasn't anything specific that kind of Britain came out with from the Treaty of Versailles. But what I would say is that if we think about the territory that was taken from Germany, and we go to the very beginning, we go to the Saar, we go, they're not allowed the Anschluss, demilitarizing the Rhineland, the Sudetenland taken off them, the Polish corridor and the Danzig within Poland. I think that we can kind of see Britain is a little bit nervous about this because they might feel that it's going to start another Second World War, and that was their biggest fear, that it was going to start another war. So, pros and cons for the peacemaker of Britain there, for David Lloyd George. And we can see the reaction of the British newspaper then. And ironically, they said Germany will never be a threat again to Britain. They felt like this was fair, it could have been harsher, but they were okay with it. And David Lloyd George came back as a well thought of figure, as a little bit of a hero from that agreement. And then we finally have the United States of America. So the aim of America then was peace. And the aim of peace is really interesting for America because they fought against Germany as well as Britain and France. But the difference here is that not many American soldiers died in the First World War compared to Britain and France. And America only fought the war for a year. So they had a much more kind of liberal, peaceful view of Germany rather than Britain and France, who had watched millions die in the trenches in a long, drawn-out war, barbaric war. So when we think about the Treaty of Versailles then, Germany were really unhappy with blame. They didn't think it was fair to blame Germany. Armaments, there was kind of no real comment on. Reparations, they believed that the reparations, just like Britain, that could be harmful. And ultimately, they were just unhappy in general with the Treaty of Versailles because they felt like it would link to another war. And we can see that from a contemporary cartoon here. We can see the fact that Woodrow Wilson is here and he's sort of walking away from the Treaty of Versailles, and the US Senate, who basically okays what the president wants to do, it's scratching its head. It's a little bit confused because it's seeing, this peace treaty doesn't seem too good. And actually, funnily enough, as a result of this, the United States didn't actually sign the Treaty of Versailles. They would go on to sign a couple of separate peace treaties, but they didn't sign the Treaty of Versailles because they were so annoyed with it. So overall, then, that's kind of what we've got. It's the Peacemakers Aims, and it's how they kind of felt the peace treaty had gone, the achievements of the peace treaties. Had they achieved their aims? Had they failed with their aims? And their kind of reactions from it.